Well, good morning. Forget Kansas, we've got Texas. We could have a great revival. Hey, this morning we are getting back to the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, if you missed 1 or 2 weeks, the end of August, you might say, I never knew we started the book of Ecclesiastes, but we did. We're jumping back in and we're going to finish it. We're at chapter 2. We've done chapter 1 already. And chapter 2 represents itself as really the great experiment of all experiments. Most of us have heard of famous experiments. We've all heard of Galileo dropping the 2 balls off the Leaning Tower of Pisa to check out gravity. We've read about Benjamin Franklin flying a kite in a lightning storm to test out electricity. And a lot of historians would say there's more folklore than fact in those. But there is one experiment that we know is factual, because the person who conducted it wrote out everything he did, and he wrote out every response. It happened 3,000 years ago, but it might be the most audacious and most well-recorded experiment in history. The man who conducted the experiment was named Solomon. He was the son of David. If you're new to the Bible, David was King David. He was David and Goliath. You've probably heard about that. And Solomon was his son. And Solomon had a pretty easy lot in life. David had to fight his way into the kingdom. Solomon had everything given to him, and he became so wealthy. Some would suggest he is the wealthiest man who has ever lived when you check out today's dollars. And he wasn't just wealthy with unlimited resources. He was a king, not a president. There was no Supreme Court. There was no Congress that could put him in check. He could basically do what he wanted. He could treat people how he wanted. He could spend what he wanted. There wasn't a single person who could say no to him. And so with this once in a world history opportunity to conduct this experiment that nobody else really today could conduct, he said this: what is the true meaning of life? And what will make me truly happy? And the reason that experiment is so relevant for today is that Solomon raises some really troubling questions. He's asking this: what if you and I today are chasing something that when we catch, it won't satisfy? What if we're spending our best energies and some of our best years and we're going after something and we're pursuing something only to find out at the end when we get it, whether it's months, whether it's years, whether it's decades, we finally have it and then we realize it was just a waste. And the book of Ecclesiastes is written to keep us from wasting our lives on something that doesn't satisfy like that. I like to collect stories of disillusionment. One of my favorite comes from 1973. Johnny Miller is a famous Hall of Fame PGA golfer. He won his first major that year. It was the U.S. Open in 1973. Now, just imagine this. His whole life as a boy, that's what he lived for. That's what he practiced for, and he dreamed about sinking the winning putt, and when he did, there was this rush of all rushes. It's not just that he made it onto the PGA Tour. That's an accomplishment in itself. It's not just that now he had won a PGA tournament. He had won the U.S. Open, the most difficult one to win. He was among the golf immortals. Everything he dreamed of, everything he worked for and hoped for, now it was his, and there was celebration, and there was a party, and he was so happy. But that very night, not even 24 hours later, he's sitting up thinking, this is it? This is what I worked for. This is what I thought would make me happy and say, now I've done it and everything. This is all I have. Maybe you're not pursuing the achievement. Maybe for you it's about a relationship. I know a woman who just was dreaming of dating this guy. She thought that's what would make her happy. She thought he was the perfect man. And so she was thrilled when he finally asked her out, and it was so nervous because she so wanted it to turn out. And she went, with her friends, and they went through 15 different outfits and 30 different pairs of shoes and how her hair's gonna look and everything. She couldn't wait. It was a winter date. And then about 30 minutes into the date that she thought would make her so happy, she thought it might be the worst date of her life. He was an idiot. He was stupid. He was self-centered. He was boring. And all she could find herself saying is, I can't believe I shaved my legs for this. It was going to make her so happy. And now it wasn't even worth shaving her legs for. And Solomon has conducted this incredible experiment to say, you don't have to wait and see. I was able to do what you think will make you happy so that you don't waste your life. Now, in chapter 1, Ben talked about this months ago. He went through and he studied and he thought and he tried to figure everything out, and he came to the conclusion there is no wisdom, there's no intellectual superiority that will make everything make sense. There are questions you will never answer. You're never going to be fully content. If you try to think your way into happiness or understanding or contentment, he said it doesn't work. He's one of the wisest men who ever lived. He goes, it's not in intellectual pursuits. And so in chapter 2, where we're starting today, he asks the question, well, if it's not about the mind, maybe it's about the body. And so he begins to throw himself into pleasure. And that's where we open up in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 1. He says this, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. What does pleasure accomplish? Now, the word pleasure in Hebrew is simba, and the only reason I point it out is that it's not a negative word in the Bible. Some of us with whacked out Christian backgrounds or pietistic backgrounds may think of pleasure and sin as synonyms. That's not here. Elsewhere in the Bible, it's translated as joy and gladness. These can be good things. He's not saying that everything he tried is bad. Some of them definitely were not tried in the right way. But he's basically saying what I found is that these pleasures, these good things, it's not what life is about. They don't fully satisfy. And so he lists what some of these pleasures were. The first one he goes into is in verse 3, when he tried wine. I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. Now, he's still in experiment mode. He's not getting crazily drunk. He's like a scientist. Okay, how does this work? How does this satisfy? How does this fulfill? He's got to keep a clear mind so he can think through this experiment. And he's able to get the best wine at that time that had ever been created because he had more resources, he had slaves, he had anything he wanted to create the best wine. And I just kind of laugh at this emphasis on wine because it tells me it's been going around a long time. But boy, I think just in my lifetime, the last 20, 25 years, we're almost getting back into that cult of wine, how wine solves everything. A couple years ago, my wife and I got a great gift going to France. A friend of mine created Ms. Pac-Man. And his ministry, as he puts it, is taking people in ministry on vacations they couldn't go on themselves. He'd been touched by my books and some of my speaking and whatnot, so he invited Lisa and I to go out to France. They also own a couple restaurants out in Boston, so they're really, the gourmet kind of people that like the best part of life that you would see in magazines. And so we visited one of the most exclusive vineyards in the world. It was in the Burgundy area of France, where they grow the grapes to make the most expensive wine in the world today. And that's Romani Conti. I've got a picture here of that where all the bushes behind that are Romani Conti. Romani Conti sells typically, depending on the year of the vintage, about 8,000 to 10,000 euros a bottle. But you can't just buy a bottle of Romani Conti. It's scarce enough to where in order to buy that, you have to buy a case of what's called Richebourg wine, which is grown by somebody who's connected with Romani Conti. Now that only sells for maybe 1,000 to 1,200 euros a bottle. But you've basically got to buy a case of that. So you're out about $15,000 to $20,000 for the privilege of spending about another $10,000 for this bottle of Romani Conti. Now, I'm not a wine connoisseur, or obviously I wouldn't be working on the staff at Second Baptist. I'd be very frustrated if that was my pleasure of choice. But I can be a little bit of a skeptic because I'm right there at the vineyard. And I want to show you what I saw. If we could bring that up. I'm just showing you. This is the vineyard. On your right, that's where Richebourg wine is grown. That's all Richebourg from the right on. On your left, that's where they grow the grapes for Romani Conti. Now, I'm looking at the tour guide. I'm like, come on. You want to tell me those bushes there about 10 feet away from these other bushes are 8 times better than the other grapes? And he's like, wow. maybe not the bushes, the grapes on that bush and the grapes on that bush, but you go further in and he goes, of course you combine all of the grapes. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. So I came back and do research. This thing kind of fascinates me. And there was this study done, a psychological study, it was published in Psychology Today, where they tested these people and they poured out this wine. They told them how much the wine cost. Well, they didn't tell the people the wine was the same in every glass. But without fail, everybody liked the most expensive wine. Now, it wasn't just perception. They were able to look at how it interacted with their brain, and neurologically they could show they actually experienced it as better wine. Which makes sense to me. If I'm out 20 grand to test a bottle of wine, I'm gonna want it to be the best wine of my life. Now, I should say I did get to eat a $25 grape. While I'm arguing with the tour guide, my really brilliant friend was off in the Romani Conti bushes and surreptitiously picking a few hanging down. And he came out and said, here's a $25 grape. I'm like, what? He goes, there's 360 grapes in a bottle of wine. Just do the math. Now, I'll leave him to the math. He's a math wizard, but it was a sweet grape. It really was. I don't know that I'd pay $10,000 for 300 of them, but it was a pretty good grape. Now, what Solomon is saying is, look, in fact, he will even praise wine in chapter 11. He's not saying that this is absolutely wrong, but what he's saying is it's not enough. I can get the very best. I can get better wine, better vintage than you'll ever be able to afford, you'll ever be able to produce. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's still wanting. It's just not enough. So if pleasure fails, what's next? Wisdom didn't work, chapter 1. Pleasure didn't work, chapter 2, 1 through 3. So what about, in verses 4 through 8, what about creativity? Okay, he couldn't think his way through. He couldn't pleasure his way through with great food and wine. And so now he's going to create. I undertook great projects, verse 4. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. Now, I'm a huge fan of creativity. Before I was on here at staff a second, my only income was basically writing books and talking about him. God enters the Bible as the creator. He goes out in Revelation 21, creating, made in the image of a creator God. If we're not creating something, a business, a family, a garden, music, something, I don't know that we're fully alive. Creativity is great. But ask Kurt Cobain or Hank Williams if getting to create and perform groundbreaking music for a living makes you feel satisfied. Ask Ernest Hemingway if writing some of the most significant novels of the 20th century makes you want to keep on living. Ask Vincent van Gogh or Robin Williams if getting to paint unbelievably valuable paintings or open up multi-million-dollar movies makes you feel content and satisfied. And you'll find out, as Solomon did, that there's just not enough to that. Creativity is important. Chip and Joanna Gaines would be the first to tell you, if you take a couple that's miserable in their marriage and put them in a remodeled house, even one with shiplap, that's not going to make them happy in their marriage. Because fixing things doesn't fix you. So what does he try next? He goes to sensuality. Verse 8, I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. Now, when I was a college student back then, we always looked for the roommates who had the big pile of records. That's what was so valuable about a roommate back then, who had the biggest record collection. Solomon didn't collect records. He's so wealthy, he collected bands, right? If he liked the music, he bought the bands. Now, the singers here, I'm keeping this G-rated because we have kids. Let me just say, they moved, okay? They didn't wear choir robes. And what they wore didn't really always stay on. And so this is the whole experience. And then he mentions that he has this harem. And if you don't know what a harem is, that's a great question to ask your parents at lunch today. And so I don't want to take that joy away from your parents, so you can have that conversation with them. But we do know Solomon had 1,000 women at his disposal. It sounds so crude to even say that, I'm sorry, but it's just what was true. He had 700 wives, 300 concubines. He might not even know their names. And most guys will never have it, and wouldn't think we want to, but never have it. He said it doesn't satisfy like you think it would. In fact, there's a modern person that's tried that. Wilt Chamberlain, if you follow basketball, you know his name, Hall of Famer, maybe one of the greatest players, well, definitely one of the greatest players who ever lived, shocked the world in his autobiography when he said he had slept with 10,000 women. Now, people just tried to do the math and thought, is that even possible? But because the math is so out there, they missed his main point. And the main point was this: as soon as he said he had slept with 10,000 women, he said, but it would have been better to sleep with one woman 10,000 times. So we always hear about the Playboy lifestyle, but Will says, look, I got to live that lifestyle. And those of you who waited until you got married and have been faithful to your spouse, I'm telling you, you made the better choice. Someone who tried it out, who experimented, he said, this is the best way. If he could go back and talk to himself in his teens, that's what he would tell himself to do. And so then Solomon talks about his fame. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. That would include his father, famous King David. But what he found is that being liked by many doesn't mean you like yourself. Just ask Marilyn Monroe. And so he's sort of wrapping up the experiment here in verse 10. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. There were no limits on this experiment. My heart took delight in all my labor. And that momentary pop, that short time, that was the reward for my toil. You know what? Creativity kept my mind busy, but when it was done, I wasn't satisfied. Sensuality kind of put the pain asleep, but it didn't do it. Wine, well, it was okay in the afternoon, but when I'm done, it wasn't there. Fame, I can't go to sleep with fame. He goes, in the end, I got a little bit. But man, what a waste. It didn't do half of what I thought I would do. And so he comes to the conclusion in verse 11, when I've surveyed all that my hands had done, what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. But chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. Solomon essentially says, I can't get no satisfaction. I've tried, and I've tried, and I've tried, and I've tried, but I can't get no satisfaction. And then he says, I have climbed the highest mountains. I have run through the fields. I have run, I have crawled, I have scaled these city walls, but I still haven't found, with me, what I'm looking for. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. And neither will we. Verse 11 is basically, look, I faced the facts. I looked at things as they really and truly are in a way we'll never be able to test out all of these things. We won't have the time, we won't have the resources, we won't have the willing people. I tested it and it just doesn't work. It's meaningless. It's a chasing after the wind. So here's what the experimenter says to us today, 3,000 years later, that's so relevant. He says, I tried what most people can't, and I found it wanting. I did what most people think will make them happy, but it didn't make me happy. I hope to find fulfillment in what most people are chasing after, but it left me feeling empty. So where do we go with this crazy experiment? Here's the conclusion I want us to draw, and this is so key, so please stay with me here. This is so key. This is the point that we're coming to. The conclusion is this: the wise person, the person who wants to live the abundant life, the blessed life. If you want to live a life without regrets, if you want to look back at the end of your days and say, that was a great run, that was a good life, I'm so happy I did what I did. To live that life, if you want that life, you have to learn to choose, evaluate, and discard your wants. You don't just follow your wants. You're suspicious of your wants. You choose your wants. Sometimes you say no to your wants, but you realize the best life is found in not letting my wants lead me, but in me evaluating my wants. Too often in the world today, and I've thought this at times in my life, if I want it, I gotta get it. That's all I need. Want is all the motivation I need. If I want it, I'm going to work to get it. Boy, if you want to get somebody angry at you today, if you want to see murder in somebody's eyes, if you want to see them call you intolerant and hateful, just tell them that what they want isn't good for them, or they shouldn't want it, or it might hurt someone else, and maybe they should lay it down. You tell somebody who really wants something no, and you're opening up a blast furnace to hell in their hatred and malice toward you. Why? Because we live in a culture that doesn't evaluate its wants. We live in a culture that worships its wants. We hold it as more precious than anything else. If I want it, I don't want any religion, I don't want any God, I don't want any government, I don't want any spouse, parent, or child to dare tell me no. This classic novel, The Human Comedy, William Saroyan writes about a 3-year-old boy. He's in the kitchen with his dad. He asks his dad for an apple. Dad cuts up the apple, gives him a slice. After a couple bites, the boy grows tired of the apple. Give me an orange. Dad peels the orange, gives him a slice of orange. The boy takes a couple bites. No, I don't. Just give me some candy. And the dad is just so tired of being bothered. He scoots a bunch of candy his way. The kid asks, that's not what I want. And the dad just loses it. And he says, I don't know what you want. Nobody ever knows what they want. People just want. And as you're reading the novel, you realize he's not just yelling at his son. He's screaming at the universe. Nobody ever knows what they want. People just want. Because they've never read Ecclesiastes. They don't realize that if we just give in to every want, not only will we wreck our lives, we'll never be satisfied. Peter was one of Jesus' first followers. He writes as an older man. He wants to protect the church. He loves these people, and so he pleads with them in 1 Peter 2:11. Dear friends, these are people he cares for, people he would lay out his life for. They mean a lot to him. He wants to give them his best advice. What does he say? I warn you, keep away from worldly desires that what? Wage war against your very souls. Peter wanted to be safe. And wanting to be safe, he denied his Savior and Lord in front of a milkmaid. And he said, that was a wrong want. I should have evaluated that. That was the wrong thing to want in that situation. And I don't want you to fall into the trap I've made. So the abundant life is found in learning to want. This will sound crazy to those of you that aren't used to church, but the abundant life is found by somebody who tried it out in embracing a life of what God wants for us, not what we want for us. And you say, how can that be true? Because God's smarter than us. God sees the whole picture. He knows. We either live with our puny little wisdom, I think this is the right way, or we have God saying, I've told you what I want. Live your life based on what I want. Wants can be tyrants. We've all been there. Come on, we've all been there. A pleasure gets you through the night, then the week, and then the month, and soon enough, you're a slave to that pleasure. It's a tyrant. It doesn't serve you. You serve it. And so the experiment results is this. The problem may not be what I lack. The problem is what I want and why I want it. problem is what I want and why. So I want you to ask yourself this, 2 questions. Here's how you walk away with this sermon. The 2 questions, if you want to benefit from what Solomon tested out on your behalf, is you learn to ask yourself 2 questions. Do I want to want what I want? And is what I want worth it? Do I want to want what I want? And is what I want worth it? If what you want, if it destroys your family, do you still want it? Maybe you're a little bored in your marriage and there's this flirtatious colleague and you think you could just be a little flirtatious. You could just go down the road a little bit and then maybe a little bit more and maybe a little bit more, realizing it could destroy your family. It could hurt your spouse. It could wreck your kids' home. Do you still want to want that? And even if you still do, is it worth it to want that? Or are you just going to follow it because you want it? You're bored. Do you want to want it if it's going to wreck your health? Yeah, it'll help you in the immediate, but will it destroy your mind? Will it destroy your body? Will it destroy your energy until it's all that you think about and that's what you live for? Do you want to want that? And is the cost really worth it? Is what you want today, does it alienate God? Look, when I think of all that God offers, I know some of you are not familiar with Christianity. You think of all that we have to give up. We think of what we gain. The peace of God, empowerment of God, purpose, the love, the affirmation of God. He pours out of his Spirit. He never lets us go. He tells us we're there. We're shamed. He says, you're my son, you're my daughter. I mean, all that God gives us, do I want to give that up for anything else? Is it worth it? Because I really, really want this? Am I going to alienate the one that has loved me like no one else? No, I don't want that, and it's not worth this. It's a new life when you learn to evaluate and then choose your wants instead of blindly follow your wants. Too few of us do that. We want it, we go, and then we're shocked that it doesn't satisfy. Shocked at how many people we hurt to get what we thought we wanted, and now it's disgusting how little we got out of it. We don't have to be shocked. You don't have to live this. You just read Solomon. He can say, this is how it is. Because you've learned to ask yourself, do I want to want what I want? And is what I want worth it? January 1, I knew I had a date that I did not want to keep, but I'd gone on too long. It had been a busy fall. I had to get back to Houston just about every Sunday. I was still speaking a lot midweek, so a lot of airport food and hotel food. Literally just sometimes just didn't have time to run like I normally do. And I kept off that date with the scale because I knew it wouldn't be good news. But it's January 1, right? You got to face it. So January 1 in the morning, I got on that scale, and between my toes, I saw 3 numbers I'd never seen before when I was standing on a scale. So I did what anybody who's frustrated with their weight does. I distrusted the floor. That's what it says on the wood floor. What does the tile say? So I go over to the tile. Same now. Okay, what about the floor rug? Maybe that'll absorb some of it. And I came to the conclusion, my scale just hates me. It has no empathy, no compassion, no understanding for all I went, and I don't know why it hates me. I treat it so well. I give it fresh batteries. It never goes hungry. I protect it every day from Roomba. Every day, Roomba wants to assault. Not once I've let, but it hates me. But because my scale hates me, when we have a week later and a woman in our area where I work has a birthday and they're passing out cupcakes, Gary, do you want one? Do I want to want it? And is what I want worth it? Now listen, I'm not talking about cupcakes. You can go have a cupcake. If you ran the marathon today, first, you're really fast to be here if you ran the marathon. But second, have a dozen cupcakes. Cupcakes are the G-rated illustrations pastors can use for nobody to be uncomfortable. But let's be honest, we live as fallen people in a fallen world. We have deeper and darker wants and desires than cupcakes. Think about those. When those wants arise, maybe they're in your soul right now. Before you spend and waste time trying to get, okay, I want it, so I've got to go after it, will you just pause? You take one step back. Before I give over my time and energy, I just want to evaluate it. Do I want to want what I want? And is what I want worth it? And think what God wants. If you want the best life, you'll go there. Let's pray.